I'd like to now recognize Ranking Member Lofgren for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just last week, the New York Times reported that the Regulatory Toxicology and Pharmacology Journal has retracted the 25-year-old study that concluded that glyphosate, the active chemical ingredient in the commercial weed killer Roundup, did not pose a human health risk for cancer. With unanimous consent, I'd like to enter the article into the record, Mr. Chairman.
So ordered.
The journal cited serious ethical concerns regarding the author's independence and disclosure. These transgressions weren't breaking news. In 2017, court records revealed that Monsanto, then the manufacturer of Roundup, had essentially ghostwritten the study. Now the journal's editor-in-chief noted that the study relied heavily on unpublished company-generated data and that he had lost confidence in the results. And the conclusion of the study, that since the authors had received financial compensation from Monsanto and didn't disclose a conflict of interest, I think it's time to retract this study. Between the year 2000 and its retraction, this, I think, glorified press release became one of the most cited papers on the chemical, and that's a quarter century of not being open and truthful about the harms inflicted on farm workers who use this chemical day in and day out. The article mentions that the World Health Organization's International Agency for Research on Cancer in 2015 classified glyphosate as probably carcinogenic to humans, and thousands of plaintiffs, including farmers and gardeners with non-Hodgkin lymphoma, have sued Monsanto, alleging that Roundup caused their cancer and the company had covered up its risks. In an early case, a jury in California State Court awarded $289 million to a school groundskeeper who said that this chemical had caused his cancer. And since then, Bayer, which has acquired this, has paid out more than $10 billion to settle approximately 100,000 Roundup claims. So I think this raises a question: why should anyone relying on EPA to keep them safe trust any regulation that relies on industry-produced science? Dr. Myberg, does this controversy illustrate the need for independent EPA science?
In a word, yes. And that I saw that particular article. It was quite disturbing to me because this question about glyphosate has come up. I realize this is a FIFRA question, not a TSCA question, but
Right.
If you can't rely upon the science that's presented to the agency, that's a pretty good argument for why EPA needs to be able to take an independent look. And I would simply note that in the statutes, such as TSCA and FIFRA, the Congress has given the EPA administrator a really tough job. It is one that industry relies on, because if EPA, to use the TSCA example, says that a new chemical is safe, then I expect that that would be the first line of defense for any company to use if a question comes up about the use of that chemical. But that's a very heavy burden on EPA, and speaking for myself, I wouldn't want to make such a determination without having the best scientific advice that I could possibly get. And while I'm not at all disparaging industry science, I agree with comments about the value of those science and its qualifications. But even in the best of circumstances, you would want a competent professional staff at EPA who could evaluate those things, and without that, EPA's decisions are inevitably going to be called into question.
Thank you. Ms. Bertrand, the ACC has long said that this chemical is safe, citing the now retracted article. Does the ACC plan to rethink its position on the safety of this pesticide now that the article's been retracted?
The ACC is a strong advocate for using the best available science, using decision data and facts in making decisions. I'm not familiar with exactly what you've just raised.
Okay.
But our position is that we do want sound science to be used in decisions.
Dr. Myberg, you know, I represent a lot of farm workers in California who have been exposed to this chemical in their work. Can you speak a bit about EPA's role in protecting American workers from workplace hazards, including farm workers?
I'll speak in general terms, that EPA does have to consider a range of exposure scenarios, certainly with pesticides as well as with toxic chemicals, and ask for people who are applying for certifications under either rule to assess those in proposing, say, restrictions on pesticide use that are included on labels or restrictions in uses of new chemicals. Now, the agency, of course, works closely with OSHA in developing these kind of things to try to make sure there's consistency, but that is something that is within the agency's authority to look at those applications.
Thank you very much, and Mr. Chairman, my time's expired, so I yield back.